I just love you. Ooh. Morning, everybody. I guess I don't actually need this book up here. I'm not going to read anything from it, but as we've heard already, this is the book that's being featured in this next 6 weeks or so, and it's phenomenal. I read it a number of years ago, and I also, when we were talking about doing this last year, this was one of the ones that I also suggested for the list, and so I'm glad that it's happening. Okay, so this says a talk on humility, faith, and joy. That's quite the combination there, isn't it? Of powers, qualities, principles. You know, I was really struck in our Advent booklet that Unity put out that they talked about in the first week that hope was a vehicle, in a sense, to get to a deeper faith. And that when we have hope and we put our hopes out there and we hope in hope, as my spiritual advisor often says, that our faith deepens, even if we don't get exactly the outworking that we were expecting. So why I bring that up is because I would like to approach our monthly topic, which is faith, our power, in a similar way by using, again, the vehicles. We'll call them humility and joy. And Roger did such a phenomenal job last week of illustrating many different ways to joy, bringing up the teachings of one of our founders, Charles Fillmore, and really, I think, expressing the thing that the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop continue to talk about, which is that it's an action. And yet it's more like a side benefit. It isn't something you really pursue. Don't really pursue joy. You don't really pursue humility either. And, you know, this will be, I thought I started that already, for goodness sake. This will be a precursor to something that might be a joke. I'm not sure. But I know a lot of people who will say this. They say, well, I talk about humility, but there's not enough people here. You get it. It is a joke. Okay. So popular 12-step philosophy defines humility as not thinking less of ourselves, just thinking about ourselves less. That's kind of tricky, isn't it? I like it too. Not thinking less of myself, but thinking about myself less. And another that's from a similar source, I couldn't find the quote, but it's something like this. I kind of have it memorized. Perfect humility might be a place where I feel freedom from the weight, they say, of character defects. I'm going to say of my ego clinging, where I feel freedom from that and the weight that it places on me at times. Then I would find myself able to know, feel, and carry out the will of God in my life. That would be, in this person's estimation, perfect humility. And I would say perfect in the sense of where Jesus says, be thou perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect, which I believe is about our first principle. It's about that we point ourselves toward an ideal. And the ideal is that everything indeed is underneath this, that, or what is underneath us is the all-loving goodness of God in all things, at all times, no matter how it looks, no matter how it seems. And I've said this many times, for me, especially, no matter how it feels. I think I absorbed a lot of that Calvinism, I guess it must be. And I don't know how that seeped into Lutheranism, but it did somehow. And it was, or Puritanism, who knows? It was, if you are feeling out of sorts, or if you are feeling suffering, or if you are feeling pain, or if you're feeling anything other than just perfect happiness and joy, you are wrong. You are doing something wrong. And this was way, way, way before I had ever heard anything about karma. I mean, I just had a sense that there was really something wrong with that. And yet I took it on and I took it in. And I would say it's probably still, in some senses, one of the things I struggle with. It comes up often, and it comes up often for other people as well, or say for our country, or say for the world, or say for, why are we still not done with war? I mean, I remember the Quakers 25 years ago put out a sign. Do you remember it? It said, war is obsolete. I believe it was 25 years ago. Anyway, I'm off on a side path. I better come back. The 8 pillars, as we've been talking about, defines humility as the second one. They talk about it as a quality of mind, though, and I'm not quite sure for me that that's true. I think humility is a heart place for me, because unless I'm in a heart place and I'm shifted out of ego clinging, or out of worry, or out of fret, or out of thinking this is all my fault, or I could have prevented this, or blah, 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 whatever it might be, unless I can do that from the heart, I can't think of me less. Because that is me. Me, 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 me. Me is very worried that I'm supposed to, what, save the world? Remember when you're a teenager and you really believed that? I mean, and in a way it's true. That's the hardest thing about some of these points in maturity and immaturity, is that something in them is actually true. It's just that, again, we have to point ourselves toward an ideal and go through. I was just reading this thing that they called healing cycles. We never know which end of a healing cycle we might be in, or someone else is in. And that isn't just, of course, physical healing. But anyway, Viktor Frankl certainly addressed that in the Man's Search for Meaning, indeed. And that would take us to backing up to the first pillar, which is changing our perspective, or looking at it from a different perspective. And that interchange between Tutu and the Dalai Lama about perspective was hilarious and really right on, I thought. But I do actually have some notes here, so I probably should pay attention to them. Okay, so here's the part about activism that I think is important, and that is that, the precious quality that is humility does not really preclude us from being activists, I don't think. It doesn't say we shouldn't stand up for justice, I don't think. Martin Luther King, as you know, and has been mentioned, it's a celebration of his birthday and of his life tomorrow. But, if he hadn't said no to oppression or systemic and systematic racism, I'm not saying, that there weren't many other people before him and others who took very dangerous stands to bring about what we might call the emergent properties of the beginning of that movement, but he was very central. And if he hadn't stood up, that tidal wave that we now know of as civil rights would not have moved in the way that it did. So his humility as a leader of other poor, humble Black folk, which is what they called themselves, at that time, mostly in the South. If he hadn't been both a follower of Jesus of Nazareth and Mahatma Gandhi, which led him to persevere in face of constant threats, arrests, beatings, jail time, and eventually his own assassination. If he hadn't done that, I don't know. How could we predict if he hadn't done that? What would have happened? But in emergent properties, there has to be a point where something becomes a watershed event. And after that, there's a flood. There's a flood, you know? And he did say, I don't think, or I don't know if I'm going to get there with you, but I know we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I mean, I can get bumps just trying to quote him. What about Mother Teresa? There's another lady. She had a lot of humility, but how many people know that she struggled for years? I'm talking about years to be given permission from her order and the priestly hierarchy who oversaw it to go out in the streets of Calcutta and take care of people. They said it would be too dangerous. They said that a small group of women would surely fail and that would reflect badly on the church. You know, the Church of Jesus, you know that one. But good old Teresa, you know, she persevered and just kept on putting in petitions and kept on meeting with people and kept on kind of doing her work anyway. Her vision was to treat the poorest of the poor, the loneliest, the dying, what Jesus would have administered to who? The lepers. And she said, each and every one of them, when I look into their face, they are the face of Jesus. So back to humility and activism. In the book of Joy, Tutu addresses this in his way. You're going to love this. He says, sometimes you have to raise your fists and start ranting. Well, don't actually do that because then they won't ask you back to, I'm kidding. That's a joke. Okay, this is what he said, and this is the book you're talking about, people calling down fire and brimstone against those opposed to justice. That's a direct quote. Okay, the bio that was written by his longtime press secretary, John Allen, is titled Rabble Rouser for Peace. Tutu observed that righteous anger is usually not about yourself. It's about those whom one sees being harmed and whom one wants to help. Now, this definitely puts me in mind of Jesus, whose worst rants ever involved that very thing: the oppression of marginalized people and the self-righteous hypocrisy of those who purported to be the godly who were supposed to be taking care of them. I mean, did he get madder about it? I can't think of anything he got madder about. I mean, because even the thing in the temple was about that, because they were being taken advantage of. I mean, you don't have enough money. All you can buy is a feather on a dove. I mean, you're not going to get much, you know, that's not much of a sacrifice. Anyway, I want to talk about my mother for a minute. Sincerely, my mother was a great champion of the underdog. They used to call her the cop in this little town where we lived, because if she saw people beating up on each other, especially if they were beating up on a littler person or if there was a group or whatever, she would stop the car, she would get out, she would go over and she would break up the fight and she would give them what for and tell them she was going to call their, you know, parents and blah, blah, blah. And of course, it was horrifyingly embarrassing, you know, to me. But I also remember thinking, that's my mom. She's got guts, you know. But anyway, that was a side path there too. But she used to like to quote Jesus from the 19th chapter of Matthew. In this new kingdom, many of the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And as he loved to do, he would use paradoxical teachings. He wouldn't just say, here, let me teach you about humility. This is how humility works. But he talked about the parable of the Pharisee and the publican. That's a perfect lesson on humility. So you could check that one out if you want to do that this week. I had an incredible voice teacher who was also my original person that I studied under for choral direction. And he would play off of that idea of the least seat in the room. And he said, the good leader or director in this case, or even singer or speaker, should always assume the least seat. Then those who follow do so of their own accord. And I didn't know what a chord meant. I thought it was like a chord, a chord on the piano. I was like, they do that of their own chord. Anyway, so I figured that out. Okay, so these things have a way of running away with us. So I'll say one other thing that I'd like you to maybe take a look at in the book too. I don't know when it'll come in terms of the pillars, but there's a tremendous amount of good writing in there about, and parts of the interviews, of course, on sadness and grief. And what does sadness and grief have to do with joy? Well, let me tell you. They're like fraternal twins, actually. And in my life experience, it's been the profound loss and the trauma, I would say, that has brought me the greatest humility. And not for that reason I was talking about earlier, not because I thought it was punishment, not because somehow I thought I deserved it, and not because I was groveling on the ground because I was so traumatized and so hurt, but because somehow it opened up a door in me, that heart space that I was talking about. It opened up a place in me where I realized in a deeper way than any other time that I am a member of the human race. This is what human beings experience. This makes us one. And certainly that's true of joy as well, in a different kind of a way. But there's something about shared suffering, and even the idea of, as I feel that, I am not alone. I know that others feel it as well. I think we experienced that during the pandemic too. That even though we were as isolated as we were isolated somehow in oneness. Not everyone, obviously. Some people suffered a lot more, not feeling like there was some kind of connective, I don't even want to say purpose to it. Wasn't exactly what it was. What was so great about it is that it was such a wonderful example of, okay, let's take this 1 hour at a time. Let's take this one set of science that we've got until we get some more. Let's take this, well, what do we do until we can get back together? Let's do each thing that comes up in front of us until we know what the next quote unquote right thing to do is. Anyway, for me, it's led directly to empathy. It's led me to compassion. And it's led me to recognizing how deep our need for one another really is. And probably most of that came for me I had a story I wrote when I was getting my writing degree. It was called Grieving in the Margins. And it was about not exactly setting aside grief, but putting my children's grief before my own. Because that's what was needed, not 24/7 or whatever. But that's what was needed. But I also had people who were so loving and so supportive who would say to me, don't censor yourself too much. It's okay if they see you on your knees, sobbing. They will say somehow inside themselves, look how my mother loved my dad. At the time, I thought, you are nuts. You are crazy. I am hiding. I am not letting them know that I feel like I can't even get up. That's not happening. But somehow the balance of it was part of what brought me through. Anyway, that's enough about sadness and grief, but you really should check out that writing about that in there because it's really quite phenomenal. I have one more thing I'd like to go through before we do the meditation. But I think I'm still okay. Yep. Okay. So the other thing that was in one of the chapters, I can't even remember which one, is this happiness researcher. Now, what kind of a job would that be? You like that? A happiness researcher? Eat your heart out, Brene Brown. I love Brene. I was just joking because she always says how terrible it is when she says she's a shame researcher and everybody goes, oh my God, are you kidding me, lady? Okay, but this lady, Sonia Lubomirsky, I hope I said that right. Lubomirsky, yes. She found 3 factors which have the greatest influence on our ability to cultivate or increase joy. And again, I'm saying that doing that and balancing that out with the humility of just life on life's terms is perhaps one of the highest things we can do in terms of our spiritual path. That's just what I think. But the first one she talked about is, and this is like the first pillar about perspective, she says, the ability to reframe situations in a more uplifting way, to change our perspective. And of course, the word positive comes to mind. But sometimes I think negative and positive are just a little bit too simplistic, right? It goes beyond that sometimes. It's more like I resonate with the Course in Miracles saying, there's another way of looking at this so I can be at peace. Now, for me, that can take a lot of applications. The first time I try to say that to myself, I may not be able to see what that other way of looking. But if indeed I make that a choice, if I make that a conscious choice to say, I will look at this. And again, this does not preclude, this doesn't say, well, there's another way of looking at them, rounding up all of the neighbors and taking them to the concentration camps. No. That's not what I'm saying. Just so you know. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm talking about those things in which we can change our perspective because our reactivity, especially emotionally, is making it impossible to get to that place where peace is, or what Martin Luther King would have said, we must come from love. Love is the only thing that will heal. Even if we're doing civil disobedience, we're doing it with love. We're doing it from a place of love. So the other 2 are an ability to, get this, express gratitude. Oh, no, I'm wrong. Experience gratitude, they said. I put express. Because for me, if I experience gratitude and I don't express it, I kind of forget about it, right? I have a tendency to just say thank you about all kinds of stuff. I talk to inanimate objects, but you know what? I'm not the only one. The Fillmores did it too. Really, read your history. You'll see it's true. And remember Maya Angelou telling Oprah, when Oprah called her up and was going, oh my God, they're suing me and everything is going really bad. And the entire Texas Cattlemen's Association want, whatever, 3 million billion. No, it wasn't that much. Millions of dollars. Anyway, and Maya Angelou said, stop it right now and tell me a few things that you're grateful for. And Oprah said, what good is that gonna do, And then she calmed down enough to start telling her a few things that she was grateful for. And the point that Maya Angelou made was, when you are in this kind of state, like you're panicking or you can't see, you can't change your perspective. Again, it's me. That is the time when gratitude can do the most for you. That is the time when what gratitude can do for you is the most important. Now that's a healing tool, if you ask me. And the last one is the ability to choose kindness and compassion. So may choosing these methods level us into a working humility in all things so that the deep joy is revealed and our faith is strengthened and renewed. And so it is. Amen. Thank you. I'm going to do a meditation from Myrtle Fillmore, Mama Myrtle, on the new year. And I'll just get Jeff to give us a little bit of background, and we'll have a little 5-minute meditation on newness and openness. She starts out by saying the very word new brings a welcome light, because there's something in our makeup that craves this freshness. Why shouldn't we give this word new a place each and every day? Let us now say that any restrictions from the past have no power in our lives. Let us realize we are in the eternal now. Beginning this day with new thoughts and new courage. Let us at the beginning of this brand new year throw open the doors of our hearts and our homes. This process transforms us by the renewal of our minds. The children in our lives are the ones who really understand this newness. Just by the touch of their imagination, the simplest things are transformed into marvelous and beautiful things. We know that the thought behind them is what gives them significance. It is this beauty that is revealed, this appreciation, all the qualities that make for transformation in the outer. Let yourself go step by step through any old habits of mind, letting them go and bringing forth the glory of this newness. The angels of overlooked opportunities come forth. Just breathe that in. Just breathe that in. Just breathe that new day, the new year, the new age, new thought, new life. So ready to come into our lives that we need only turn our face to it and behold this angel of light. We are transformed with renewed purpose in our thoughts and our words. We look within once more, and the joy that is tucked away in a remote corner comes bursting forth, and everything around us becomes lit by a rosy light and a new vision. Take another deep breath and just slowly come back to your surroundings, come back to the light in this room and the beautiful music. Come back to the wonder of you and the wonder of our community, of support, of humor, and of joy. Amen. Beautiful. I would like us to do the prayer while we're standing before we sing. Let's do that. It seems like then we're all ready to do it. I kind of have to face this way to see it. We're still kind of getting used to this new version. Everybody about there. Good. We got it. Together, the light of God surrounds us. We are light. The love of God enfolds us. We are love. The power of God protects us. We are power. The presence of God watches over us. We are presence. Wherever we are, God is.